Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I'm the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So this is kind of a cool video that I'm going to share today. It may be just a regular, average video for you all, but it's really kind of a special video for me because of the person that I'm featuring in this video. I came across this video popped up on my Instagram yesterday, and when I saw the guy, I'm like, I was listening to what he said. On Instagram, I love Instagram because they'll take videos that could be half an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and just take little clips of some of the most important things of a clip. And after I saw this little 30-second clip, I knew I wanted to find the original video. So I looked around after I saw it, after I listened to the little section. And I was trying to ask around, like, do you guys know who these two guys are? Because I want to see the full video. But I kept looking at the guy who was being interviewed. I'm like, man, this guy looks familiar. I can't place why this guy is resonating with me. What is it? So then I clicked on one thing. I looked at another video on the page. So then I found out what the guy's name was who was being interviewed. I'm like, oh, his name is Rodrigo. There's something about this guy that I don't know. It's something that's egging me, and I can't figure out what's going on here. So then that finding out what his name was helped me find a full video on YouTube. And dude just had a lot of great things to say. I'm like, I definitely gotta do a cover on this video. But it just couldn't tell me why it is that I kept thinking something about this guy that I'm like, why is this guy in my mind? I couldn't figure it out. So after I finally figured out what the guy's name was, I went to his Instagram and I sent him a text. I sent him a DM, and it finally struck me like, man, I know this guy. I told you I've always said I've lived in Sao Paulo for 9 years. Even before I moved to Sao Paulo, I had been visiting Sao Paulo since 2008. Whereas my first 7 years visiting Brazil was mostly in Bahia. I went to a couple other states, Minas Gerais, Rio de Janeiro, Paraná. So I met a lot of really good people over the years, even before I moved there. But I think I met this guy, Rodrigo, after I had moved there. And when I sent him a message, I'm like, dude, do you remember me? I think I knew you sometime back in Sao Paulo. And he messaged me back like, oh my God, man, of course I remember you. I met you at Feira Preta. Feira Preta being like the big Black Expo event that happens usually in November. It's one of the biggest Black cultural events in Brazil. And we just reconnected. Since I moved back to the US 3 years ago, I got a new phone. I lost a lot of my contacts. I didn't remember what Rodrigo's last name was. And so it was just intriguing that I connected with him yesterday this way after I saw this video that just popped up on my feed. I'm like, wow, it reconnected me with this guy who I can honestly say he was one of my good friends in Sao Paulo. I think he lived in Guarulhos actually, which is that's where the international airport is located. It's about a half an hour drive without traffic. But it was cool to see this guy. It's like we got a lot of catching up to do. As I was talking to him yesterday, he was like, man, I'm over in Dubai on vacation right now. I'm like, wow, incredible. He's on the other side of the world. Everybody's going to Dubai these days, enjoying themselves, whatever. I'm going to reconnect with this guy when I get into this, interview game. He's definitely going to be somebody I'm going to have on the show. He's already invited me to come on to his podcast. So, we got a lot of catching up to do. Anyway, I want to talk about something that Rodrigo said in this video. Okay. I highlight this because it's not something that you commonly hear in Brazil. Okay. So that's why I wanted to point this out. It's a big deal. When people make this type of decision, when people have this type of connection with their identity and looking at the collective identity of Black people and the situation of Black people, in this case, we're talking about in Brazil. Rodrigo said this, and I always knew he felt this way because of the conversations we had some years ago. He said, I want my son to look like me. The only way to do that is to marry a Black woman. Entrepreneur wants no part of the whitening process in Brazil. Now, if you all have followed this channel for I don't even a couple of months, a couple of years, and you know why this is a big deal. You don't hear many Black people who will speak out this type of way. So before I get into this video, definitely like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell so that you know when I put up the next video. And with that said, let's talk a little bit about what Rodrigo had to say in this short clip from this full interview. Okay, so this is Rodrigo. One of the reasons that threw me off as to why I didn't recognize him is because when I knew him in Sao Paulo, he had hair. He shaved his head right now. So it took me a minute. I'm like, when I really looked, I'm like, dang, I remember this guy. It was just cool to reconnect him. He was one of the guys I can definitely call a friend. I can't wait till we have some more time to be able to talk, find out what he's been doing with his life for the last 5 or 6 years. Because I don't think I've talked to him since I've been back in the U.S. particularly. Um, so what he's saying, it speaks on what's called the process of embranquecimento in Brazil. And it's something that I've said you can't get a full understanding of the racial thing in Brazil until you understand that elites always wanted to erase the black population through means of what they call interracialism, what they used to call miscegenation, race mixing, where we'll say after 2 to 3 generations of mixing, concessive mixing with whites or near whites, you produce a whiter child. Rodrigo is speaking specifically to that because most black families have it in their family. If they get it from their grandmother, grandfather, mother, father, look, you need to marry white so we can get rid of this black stain out of our family. We know about the famous painting. I've talked about the painting over and over. And to understand Brazil is something in terms of race, you have to understand what's said in this photo. Go back in the archives. I've explained what this means going from the dark skinned black grandmother to the white or near white child. It's an ideology. It's something a lot of Black Brazilians can remember somebody in their family telling them that they needed to, get with somebody white so that you can, lighten the family. Melhorar a raça, improve the race, a lot of people will say. Rodrigo's comments question the idea of palmitagem. The palmitagem is what people have named, particularly, Black feminists, I think, created this term, and it just says it labels this predilection of Black Brazilian men to choose white partners, particularly when they come into a better financial situation. They call it palmitagem. Why are all the prominent Black men in Brazil married to white women or near white women? The musicians, the rappers, the actors, the lawyers, the doctors, they all seem to have white wives. It's only been in the last decade that this has even been a question, because for most years, for the decades, for the centuries, it's always been, look, white in your family. It wasn't even a question. People like Rodrigo coming up from the new generation are saying, no, we're rejecting that. I want my kids to look like me. This slow questioning and rejection of the whitening process. Before, it wasn't even a question. It was just kind of accepted. You should want to whiten your family. Help us whiten Brazil. The ideology has been strong since the end of the 19th century and on. People have been calling, we need more Black couples. How can we talk about having Black representation, Black power, Black money, if we can't talk about having more Black couples? A lot of people have talked about there are no references for Black couples. We're just now getting references for Black people in Brazil's media, in the movies and in television commercials and in TV series and all of that. And it's really lagging in Black couples, because generally what I've seen is that when you have a series or a novella in Brazil, novellas mean soap operas, if there's a Black character, they usually pair that Black character with a white partner. So this is why people are calling for more Black couples. We can't have a Black power base without having more Black couples, with, Black men and Black women both being encouraged to marry and reproduce with white people. This is another thing that Rodrigo was talking about here. He says openly, look, I want my child to look like me. That's what he's saying. We're going to get to I'm going to overdub the video in a minute. In recent years, like in the last decade, we've seen Black dating apps that's helping to bring Black men and Black women who have a rediscovery, a redemption of a Black identity, and they want to look up with a person who has that same consciousness. It's like, what I've seen in a lot of dating apps, and this can come out in a study. I haven't particularly seen a study on this, but you can find what people's preferences are by looking at the people they choose on a dating app. So then a lot of people who were coming through this rediscovery of a Black identity were finding, like, I wasn't finding the type of people that I wanted to find just on regular dating apps. So then somebody came up with the idea of creating an app for specifically Black people who wanted to connect with other Black people. So this is what I say, the process of the changing of an identity in Black Brazil. So what Rodrigo has to say is very symbolic of the mindset that's changing in Brazil these days. So let's check out what Rodrigo had to say. I'm going to just overdub what he said right now. And then I'm going to come back, and as always, why is this important? Because if you're coming from, the United States, this may not seem like a big deal to you. Like, so what? We got an issue right now with Black men and Black women who seem to be wanting to go in the opposite directions. We have like a gender war going on between Black men and Black women in the United States. And in Brazil, they're trying to mount a type of unity in Brazil that was never there because Black Brazilians have always been encouraged to marry white people to produce whiter offspring and to whiten Brazil. So this is why I wanted to share what Rodrigo had to say, because you've got this population of Black Brazilians, this new Black identity in Brazil that's growing there. And this is why I wanted to talk about what he had to say. So right now, I'm going to just overdub some of the words that Rodrigo had to say on this particular podcast. So check it out. I'm a guy, I'm married to a Black woman. I thought that was sensational, man. Really. Say it like that. You have a place to speak.
Eu vou dizer uma coisa muito pessoal. Assim, eu quero que meu filho,
I'm going to say something very personal. I want my son, when he's born, to look like me.
Entendeu?
Para ele ser parecido
comigo,
for him to look like me, the only way to do that is to marry a Black woman. That miscegenation, it's going to decharacterize that. I don't take that as a rule for people. It has to be like that. That was for you. That, for me, I say, I want my son to look like me. You take an Oriental person, for example, a Japanese person, they marry each other usually. Next generation, next will also be. A Jew marries a Jew, the Korean marries Korean. In my case, I don't expect all people to be like that, but in my case, I want my son to look like me. So you heard what Rodrigo had to say. He was direct and right to the point. When I heard that, and I've known this about Rodrigo, like I said, it was great to reconnect with this guy. He has some incredible things to say in the overall video. And there's another piece of that video that I want to talk about, and I'm going to probably chop that up sometime soon also. I haven't even watched the whole video yet, but just the parts that I saw, I'm like, man, Rodrigo's got some fascinating things to say. So you heard what he said. He wants a Black child that looks like him. And the only way he can create that is with another Black woman. Now, this is not to say, I know people who are into the mixed thing and the Pardo thing. Oh, well, see, you're negating what you believe. Listen, I acknowledge the fact that when you have a person who has a Black parent and a white parent, a Black parent and a Native American parent, whatever they might be, of course, physically and genetically, they're going to be, part this and part that. But in the same way, the Brazilians can say that a person who looks white in Brazil but is not purely white, they're still accepted as white. So we say they're socially white because we know millions of Brazilians who identify themselves as white, but they're not necessarily white in the American or European standard. But socially in Brazil, they are accepted as white. This kind of the same way that I see the thing with people of African ancestry who may be mixed with one race or another. And this is what I've said. I'm not excluding the fact that these people have a mixed race background. But what I am saying is that socially, when you look at how Pretos and Pardos, let me be clear about that. I've already said many times, I know that all Pardos or mixed brown people are not Black. But as we saw in a recent video that I did, it's safe to assume that 25 to 40% of those Pardos who are classified as Pardos are Black. Just because you're not the darkest crayon in the box doesn't mean that you're not Black. I'm gonna just leave it at that. I've talked about this topic many times already. I want to get into the comments, and I also want to put this into context. So these are just some of the comments that people posted, comment on what Rodrigo had to say. First, now, so these are the comments in Portuguese, and when I put this on the blog, for those who read Portuguese, you can go ahead and read the original comments. I translated them into English. First comment says, apparently this woman here is referring to somebody who had said something previously. She says, it's incredible that you want to problematize any kind of movement linked to relationships between people of African descent. You want to palmita, damn it. And what she's saying is, if you want to swirl, go ahead and do that. But let the Black people love. This is a relevance in his life, and you're creating problems. Why? So she strongly supports what he's saying. Obviously, somebody had come along. And generally, I understand what she's talking about, because in Brazil, people, particularly Black people or Black and brown people, if you prefer, tend to say amor no tem cor. Love has no color. So they're fighting for the right of Black people to love each other, because it's almost like Black people are not allowed to love each other. If you're Black, you should desire to have a white person. There was an article I did a couple of years ago. Several years ago, where the article had said, how could you choose a Black person over a white person? It's almost like everybody knows the racial hierarchy. And it was like somebody gets with another Black person. It's like, what are you thinking about? When you have a choice of getting with a white person, you choose a Black person. Everybody knows what that racial hierarchy looks like. So here it is. Black people are calling for Black couples and Black love. And then you still have other people like, oh my God, you're being a separatist. Oh, you're being a segregationist. Oh, you want to bring segregation like the United States and South Africa to Brazil. That's usually how people react. And people always ask, why is it not? He pointed this out. Rodrigo pointed this out in a video. Why is it that when Jews marry Jews, Japanese marry Japanese people, Koreans marry Koreans, white people marry white people, there's no problem. But when black people look up with other black people, it seems to be a problem. I've heard numerous black Brazilians talk about this. Let's go on to the second comment. There are 1,000 characteristics that can be more like the father or the mother. Basing yourself only on the color of the skin or the type of hair or eyes, etc., is very superficial. In the end, the way of being is much more important. Set good examples of how to be a good man, father, and husband, and that's fine. And there's no guarantee that you'll be the same. Okay, so this is more in line with what I see a lot of Brazilians will say. Why are you even looking at that? It doesn't matter. And I'm saying to a degree, because we live in a racist world that shouldn't be like that. This is actually true. It shouldn't be that way. But when you run into a situation where everybody of a particular group looks out for their own group, black people have to do the same thing. I mean, it's just the way that it is. Next comment. We have to respect his opinion, but that doesn't fit my life regardless of what race is in. Okay. I don't know if he's saying that as a joke or he's being serious, but there's a lot of people say, okay, that's good for you, but that doesn't work for me. I'm going to marry and I'm going to get with whoever I want to get with, regardless of what they look like. And I tend to think Brazilians can react, say this is true or this is not. But when I hear black people say love has no color, I tend to think they're not going to flat out say that they prefer white people as a partner, as a lifelong partner. So they're going to say love has no color. To me, it almost symbolizes like I'm using this excuse because deep down I do want to marry white also. They're just not going to say it because they're going to be shamed because of that. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I could be right. Next comment. But in Brazil, it's enough for a black man or woman to climb on a sheet of sulfite paper and marry a white man or woman. Love has no color. So being ironic here, right? Because black men and black women, particularly those who climb up the socioeconomic ladder, they tend to marry white. It's almost like I think this person is being ironic. Like this is how black people are, Not saying all, but anybody who's hung out in Brazil, you kind of get a gist of what I'm talking about. This is why a lot of people of the newer generation is trying to push the idea of black couples and black love. A lot of articles on the blackbraziltoday.com blog talking about amor preto, like black love. That's the cure for the self-hatred that we have. Next comment. He's right. I chose to be with a black woman. I was lucky she wanted me too. We had a beautiful little black girl. That's what it's all about. Okay. I like what this guy said, because not only is it difficult when a person moves up the socioeconomic ladder, they're generally going to be surrounded by people who don't look like them. So if you're a person, you got people where they've been taught either marry white or love has no color. If you're still under that ideology and that mindset, then you're not going to necessarily be looking for a black person. So then with a redemption of black identity and you wanting to have a collective connection with black people, it's going to still be difficult because now you got to find a partner who has that same mindset. So this is what he was saying. I chose to be with a black woman. I was lucky she wanted me too, because it's not enough for him to have the ideology that I want to marry black and have black kids. Somebody else that he meets has to have that same mindset. And unfortunately, in Brazil today, it's still not. I still say the overwhelming majority of all I'll say black and brown Brazilians have the mindset that says love has no color, which says most likely they're gonna marry a white person. Okay. Next guy, all he did was just give applause. Like, I'm applauding what he says. I agree. Last comment. The only mistake in his comments is that it should be a rule, not just so that our children look like us, but to preserve our people themselves. I mean, I don't think I need to say much there, because obviously he knows that Brazil's ideology for over a century has been to erase the black and brown population so that everybody appears to be white. So he says he's going as far as to say the only mistake that he's making, because if you notice what Rodrigo said, he knows that this is not for all black people. He was speaking for himself. But this guy in his comments says the only mistake in his comments is that it should be a rule, not just so that our children look like us, but to preserve our people themselves. I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm just saying you can't preach blackness where everybody around you wants instead, like, look, I'm trying to whiten my kids. What are you talking about? Two black people, that's no good. So we do see a changing of the mindset, but it's still a very small process. It's still a slow process. But the more people take the line and start explaining why it's necessary for Black people to have some form of immunity, the wider the message spreads. So we might be seeing something different in the coming generations, right? So that's what Rodrigo had to say. Again, these are the original comments in the original Portuguese. And this is what Rodrigo had to say. And that's why I said I had to cover this video today. If we still don't understand why it's important to talk about this topic coming from the Brazilian perspective, let me just, share a couple of articles here. Again, almost 4,000 articles over the blackbraziltoday.com blog. People are talking about palmitagem, the discomfort of thinking about race and relationships, Black people being engineered to marry white, produce whiter kids. Palmitagem is a very big a relationship of self-hate. They say love has no color, but palmitagem is not just about affection. This girl says coming to terms with female palmitagem and a preference for whiteness. She felt exploited by white men who were just exploiting her for certain reasons. This guy, I still have to get to this article here. This is probably one of the most powerful articles on the blog. This guy admits that he grew up in an era of palmitagem. Say palmitagem exists. I am an example. Black man reflects on growing up in Rio de Janeiro and how the culture and racial hierarchy influences the adoration of white girls. We need to recognize our palmitagem and the preference for white skin. These articles go on and on. Check them out, blackbraziltoday.com. Again, the famous photo portraying Brazil's dream of whitening the population. What I like what's going on right now is that there have been some Black artists who have done a rereading of that painting. So in that painting, it says the dark-skinned grandmother had a child with a white man, produced a mixed child, the mulatto girl. The mulatto girl marries the white man and produces a white or near white child, which is the Brazilian dream. This has been something that's, even if people have never seen this painting, this is something that's been, pushed inside their families when their families tell them to marry somebody white. What I find intriguing is that in recent years, people have done a rereading of this photo. So like this one, for example, an artist took it back and made all the characters in the painting Black. Said, no, we're taking this back. We have pride of being Black. We want to produce Black kids and we want to have Black families. That's what this photo was saying. This is just one of the images. Then you have another one. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, this is the image that I just showed you, and this is the one that's blown up. You can see all four people, the same grandmother, but now she has 3 Black people in her family. Her daughter, who she had with a Black man, married another Black man, and they created a Black child. So they reread the image, says, no, we love being Black. We want to keep this Blackness in our family. Okay. Somebody else did another painting. This is another painting that reproduced all 4 of the images. Well, they replaced 3 of the images, because here you have a clearly Black woman, whereas the other woman was a Black woman, a lighter skinned woman, a mulatto mestiza, if you prefer. She married a Black man instead of the white man in the original photo, and they in turn had another Black child. The grandmother is actually looking down in praise, whereas in the original photo, she's looking to the heavens with a palm tree in the background saying, thank you for removing this Black stain out of my family. Another symbol of this rising change of the Black mindset in Brazil, saying we do need to, preserve ourselves, because Brazil has always wanted to erase Black people. These articles just talk about Black love. Who's afraid of Black couples? In Brazil's media, seeing a romantic pair that features a Black man and a Black woman is rarity. What's the message here? I just talked about this a few minutes ago. Does Black love heal? Black couples discuss the question of what it means in an anti-Black society. So I've heard people talk about the stares they get. It's enough when just a Black person shows up to an area or an environment, a restaurant or a nice shopping mall, where people who have high, let's say, buying power. If it's a Black person, they're almost expected to be with a white person. So then it's enough that you have a Black person show up in such an area, but then they show up with a Black partner too. It's like people are taken aback by that. So this is what I'm saying. It's a changing mindset that's going on in Brazil right now. See if there's anything else here. Does Black love exist? In Brazil, miscegenation and interracial love relationships are always praised, but where does that leave Black couples? I remember some years ago, there was this, I think he was an anthropologist in Brazil, but I think he was either from France or a French-speaking country, and he was just talking about how rare it is to see Black people being able to show affection to each other on Brazilian television. It was like either it's white love or you got a mixed couple, but very rarely did you see a Black couple. Taís Araújo, I always say she's Brazil's top black actress. She says she grew up without having a black couple that represented me. She Taís, who I believe is Brazil's top black actress, she's married to the top black actor in the country, Lázaro Ramos, seen in this picture. And they starred in a series together that showed that black people can be successful. It was like in Brazil's television series and novellas, black people are always portrayed as just second-rate people, the help, the limo driver, the bodyguard. This series, Mr. Brown, highlighted two, well-to-do black people. And it was like, you just don't see that very much in Brazil's media. That's slowly changing. But that was a watershed moment in Brazilian media to see two successful black people in a television series. It's just not, as much as people talk about black representation in the United States, it's almost impossible to see these more positive images in Brazil featuring black people. Like I said, it is changing, but it's a very slow change. What else do we have here? This is talking about the rise of Afro-Dango, which is an app that promotes black couples. 20 years ago, obviously we didn't have apps 20 years ago, but even in the last 10 years, you just would have never thought this could have been possible. And these apps are getting to be more and more popular, even though I've heard there's a few problems going on in some of these communities, but the thought is still there. There's at least, as far as I know, there's at least two apps that are, the goal is to introduce black men to black women, for long-term relationships. So that's another step forward in the call for, black unity in Brazil. Okay, so this is an article about Afro-Dango. Social network brings together black men and black women for relationships and strengthening of the black community against racism. And I believe this is another article about that. A revolution of black love, Afro-Dango, a social network for Afro-Brazilians to meet, flirt, and initiate relationships, find success online. So it's good to see, because it shows that Rodrigo is not the only person with this mindset. It's slowly starting to spread to other, black minds throughout the country. So these are the reasons that I felt like I needed to talk about this in this video. I have to reconnect with Rodrigo. It was really good to, be able to reconnect with this guy. I hadn't talked to him in about 5 or 6 years, maybe more. But what he had to say was really important. It shows a shifting of the mindset among black Brazilians. He had a lot to say in the 1.5 hour long video, and I have to, maybe do some reactions to other parts of that video as well. But what did you think as of right now? As I said, if you're a black American, this idea of I want children that look like me, that's nothing new for us, but it's a change for black Brazilians, because they've always been taught you need to have whiter children. So anyway, want to know what you all thought about this video? Drop a comment in the comment section, like this video, share this video. Consider subscribing to the channel. Click on that notification bell so that you know when I put up another video. Visit the blackbraziltoday.com blog, almost 4,000 articles over there. With that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post here on Black Brazil Today.